Dialogue, arguably the most important part of human communication. There are over 7,100 languages spoken in the world today, and everyone watching this video will speak at least one of them. It's one of the things that unites us all, and that's why in every entertainment medium, dialogue is essential. Want to explain the concept of something? Dialogue. Need some story exposition? Dialogue. Want to do an epic funny? Dialogue. It's near impossible to tell an elaborate story without the use of any written or verbal language whatsoever, and this is especially the case of games. Unlike with movies, shows or books, we're directly engaging within the confines of the story. We're in the world, we're going to want to communicate with someone or pick up on some of the lore lying around. I mean, come on, without dialogue, how am I going to let my teammates know just how dogshit they are? There are so many games out there that rely so heavily on dialogue. Just look at Persona. My god, that game can be a yakfest sometimes. But without all that dialogue, you don't get the sheer amount of character depth a cast like Persona 5 has. Without dialogue, you simply can't make a compelling game. That's it. That's the video. We're done here. Wait, why isn't it ending? Wrong. You absolutely can have an elaborately told narrative-focused game with not a single shred of dialogue. I know it sounds crazy, but trust me, plenty of them exist. In fact, let me contextualize just how perplexing of an idea that sounds on paper. Imagine watching an anime in sub. Remove the subtitles, so now you have no idea what's being said. But you can still guess from the tone of the voice, right? So, remove the voice too. Keep the music, keep the visuals, and now plug in a controller, take control of the main character, and do that for the next 3 hours. You'd be completely lost, right? Sounds miserable. So how exactly do you make a whole game like this and make it work? Worry not, for that's exactly what I want to look at. I find it so fascinating that game developers have found a way to perfect the art of storytelling without using any conceivable human language at all. How do they achieve this? What goes into making a game like that? That's what I want to answer. And to do just that, I played through some of the best silent games on the market. Anybody who's been paying attention in the last few weeks has probably heard of a game called Sky Children of Light. It's a pretty damn good free-to-play game that's almost entirely silent. You can't even communicate with anyone you see around you without spending a moment in silence with them. But you can send each other messages in chat, and that's not enough. We must go beyond that. I'm looking for games with no dialogue, so why even bother bringing up Sky? Well, that's because the developers behind the game are That Game Company. Remember that name? They've probably made a little something you've heard before, which brings me on to the first game I want to look at. One of the founding fathers in popularizing the silent game genre, being released back in March of 2012, Journey was one of the first games of its kind. I vividly remember watching PewDiePie play this back then and being amazed at how different it was to anything I'd seen before. The vibes were just immaculate. And no guys, I will not elaborate on that. Journey is pretty much in the name. It's a game all about going on a journey. It's a hard game to dissect on a narrative level as it's kinda just open to your own interpretation. But that's what makes it universal. We've all gone on a journey before, whether it be a literal physical one or simply just a mental one. You can take the game on face value, or you can apply your own experiences to fit the mold. And I think that's where Journey does an amazing job of being a narrative experience for everyone. It's not necessarily in the story itself. It's everything the game does to represent something we've all been through. That's where it excels without needing any dialogue. It's a shared, unique experience. From the very first moments you're dropped into this world, everything just connects. It doesn't need words to tell you that the journey will be a long and grand endeavor. You can tell from the environment around you. Large mountains that stretch on for what seems like forever, but it doesn't feel daunting because the visual style is so bright. It's pointed out to you multiple times that you're always walking towards the light, whatever your light may be. It can't be understated how important the soundtrack is here too, calming when you're traversing the terrain, but grandiose during the game's narrative heights. It sets the mood perfectly for whatever section you're going through. My absolute favorite thing about Journey is you don't even have to go at it alone. You'll meet fellow players taking their own passage through the desert, and it's here in particular that you really get to see how Journey goes beyond simple human communication. Sharing these experiences with completely random unnamed individuals makes you come out of the game feeling like you've made friends for life. The lengths you've walked together, the feats you've achieved together, the sights you've seen together. Wait bro, what the fuck? Get out my shop. It's experiences like this that you don't need words to describe. It's a shared emotion. Days later, I'm still thinking about this one player I traveled nearly the entirety of this mountain with together. We got our asses beaten by the weather, abused by the floating cyber dragon, but we always waited for each other no matter what and climbed up together. Well, until... No! Don't leave me! Unironically, one of the saddest gaming experiences I've ever had. I'll never forget you, Voltsful. The cherry on top of all of that is the fact that you can vocally communicate with your partner. It's only a fleeting chime that doesn't really say or mean anything at all. Yet I felt like I had entire conversations with them just through this one meaningless sound. And the gameplay itself only ever heightens the experience. Sure, it seems like a walking simulator, and for the most part, I'll admit it pretty much is. But the game does such a masterful job of making you really feel every footstep. Particularly in that snowy mountain section, section. I damn near broke the analog on my controller fighting against the pushback this section gives. I basically walked through that shit myself. That's the perfection of this area though. It's supposed to symbolize the fight to get over the last hurdle, and it physically demands it from you. By the time you reach the end of the game, you'll both physically and mentally feel like you just experienced one's life journey. Then you look at the time and realize, damn, I only spent an hour and 37 minutes on this? I feel 70 years older and ready to leave the mortal plane as I've reached a new sense of being, which is insanely impressive considering Journey does all of this without a single spoken or written word from any known human language. So what did I learn from Journey? Well, you don't always need to talk to understand one another. Shared experiences are a language in and of itself. Sometimes you can take in a narrative purely just through absorbing your surroundings, and that gameplay can help to stimulate physical sensations that directly relate to the character without needing to be told what that character is going through. The idea that you can tell a story simply through just your surroundings is an idea I want to explore a little more, which brings me on to for the longest time, I legitimately thought ABZU was made by that game company too. Whoever spread that misinformation to me, fuck you, but I get it because it really fits their niche. ABZU is another experience where you travel through unique terrain, essentially being like Journey, just underwater this time. But don't worry, this might be the one game where underwater levels are actually safe. The story of ABZU is of a lone diver, trying to bring life back to the ocean, ridding the waters of machinery damaging the ecosystem. Holy shit, I'm off my head on roids, brother. There's definitely much more of a deeper lore here, with there being an ancient civilization way before our character was around. But honestly, I originally thought ABZU was a cinematic experience about showcasing the dangers of pollution on the world's oceans. It could still be, it could even be both. That's what I love about these kind of games, it's up for your own interpretation. So what does ABZU do that sets it apart from a game like Journey and makes it stand out on its own? For starters, the environment in ABZU is meant to be so much more alive, and wow do they achieve this with flying colours, and I mean that literally. Someone must have dropped their Skittles into the ocean because everything is so bright and colourful down here that it's just brimming with life. Being underwater is usually an anxiety-inducing thought. For some people it's even a phobia, and there are other games on the market like Subnautica that manipulate that fear, which is what makes the use of colours in ABZU so essential to the experience. Rather than paint the sea as a claustrophobic dark pit of unknown, it presents it as a place of beauty, swimming with all kinds of exuberant life forms. How can you be scared of a whale cranking out a 360? I didn't know bro was chill like that. One of my favourite features in the game are the meditation spots you can find in each area. Here you can sit in peace and observe the wildlife. You can follow each one individually, all with their own species names and everything. A feature like this really helps to immerse yourself and goes that extra step in bringing the local areas to life. The ocean feels alive because everything in it is alive, and that's what makes the desolate areas hit even harder. Going from bright and busy to unlit and uninhabited, the contrast really helps you to mentally grasp the level of problem at hand, and it does it in a completely natural way without needing to scream in your face that big robot is bad. After experiencing the joyous sights yourself, you'll naturally want to destroy the robot without the game needing to direct you to do it. You're already sold on the cause. I will also admit they did such a good job that I actually got jump scared multiple times by these huge chunks of shit. Maybe this is closer to Subnautica than I gave it credit for. And the bow on top of the visual style is the sound design. Once again, the soundtrack does a wonderful job of matching the tone of each section, being full of life in the colourful sections, whilst feeling empty in the abandoned areas. On top of this though, I really need to give credit to the ambient sounds. Every splash you make, every ripple you cause, every movement you take, all of it can be heard. You can hear the ocean's pulse as you traverse the waters and swim alongside the fish. The ocean's so alive, you literally help it give birth to more fish. Here, have my eyes, I won't be needing them anymore. That aside, the world building in ABZU is actually pretty great. It does so in the complete opposite way to Journey. Rather than focusing on one expansive region, you visit multiple micro-habitats. Depth is added not through the sheer scale of one singular location, but through the amount of different areas this one place has. Variety adds depth. On top of that, you also have all the wall drawings telling the tales of the aforementioned ancient civilization. And to bring everything full circle, all of this makes up for quite the expansive world to absorb. You can take in the story of ABZU just through observing everything in close proximity. No words needed. So just like with Journey, what have I learned from ABZU? Colors are essential. Colors bring emotion. They're a direct representation of feelings that don't rely on any text to explain inner thoughts. Ambient sounds can really help to bring a world alive. You can tell a story through the active progression of the game's world without needing any explanation. Illustrations tell stories. You don't need words to contextualize anything if the picture is painted so vividly. Whilst ABZU and Journey are amazing games, there is one aspect they fall a little short in. They're grand tales of cinematic experiences, but they aren't deep-rooted, emotional narrative masterpieces. It's pretty hard for a game with no dialogue to tell such a story. How does one convey such clear emotions to that level without having the words to do so? Well, strap yourself in. Things are about to get heavy. I'm so happy I get the chance to talk about GRIS. It's one of my favorite games ever made. It transcends the medium of gaming and becomes straight up art. Be warned, we're about to talk about some very hard-hitting topics. GRIS is a game all about how we handle the loss of a loved one. We're taken on a journey through all 5 stages of grief and how each one affects us. It's about the struggles we go through when dealing with pain and how it can cause a person to shut down. But it's also a story about adversity and how we can come to live with those feelings. I'm gonna throw out a huge spoiler warning. If the concept of the game sounds interesting to you or you relate to what I just talked about, please go into it blind. Skip this section if you have to, but I implore you to experience it for the first time yourself. Anyway, you've been warned. GRIS starts off bright and cheery, colours all around her, singing a merry tune in the hands of the one she loves. But then everything changes. It happens. Loss. Her world starts to crumble around her, colours fading away. The background turns to nothing as everything around her disappears. The popular theory with GRIS is that the colours we see represent the 5 stages of grief. White represents the first stage, denial. Her surroundings are empty and lifeless to represent how GRIS is shutting everything out. She's pushing reality away. She eventually starts to let more of the world around her in, but this leads to the next stage. Red represents the second stage, anger. It's a colour often associated with pain, and pain is what usually leads to anger. Both the background and the foreground become flooded with red as storms are thrown your way one after another. It's intense, which is fitting as it's representing the inner turmoil GRIS is feeling. The storms represent GRIS's fit of rage. At first she can't control them and is blown away when caught, but eventually she learns to weather the storm, showing that she's slowly learning to live with her fury. Green represents the third stage, bargaining. In an attempt to avoid the pain, GRIS is trying to reach out to someone or something to rely on. Green is a very natural colour, hence why we start to see a lot of wildlife here. GRIS meets a little friend, representing how she's trying to rely on others now to help. But ingeniously, you can still see very prominent reds to show that feelings don't just fade. Deep-rooted anger lingers. Colours continue mixing throughout the whole game to really show the flurry of emotions a person goes through when experiencing such grief. Blue represents the 4th stage, depression. It's very befitting here as it symbolises multiple things. First of all, it's a very calming colour, which represents how numb GRIS feels on the inside. It's also cleverly used in a water section. GRIS's deep dive into the water represents her continued plummet into depression. The deeper she dives, the harder it is to find a way out. And when she eventually does, she's brought right back to where she started, highlighting how depression is a cycle. And finally, yellow represents the 5th stage, acceptance. A colour often associated with joyous feelings, yellow is used as the guiding light that helps GRIS back on the path to reality. When GRIS is going through another depression, it's the fleeting feelings of acceptance that guide her. When GRIS is back on her feet, it's this guiding light that reveals paths previously unseen by her. Colours aren't just used to represent the 5 stages though, as it goes a step beyond that. Throughout the game, GRIS will consistently be confronted by a shadowy figure trying to bring her back down, and quite tragically, that being is GRIS herself. It's a representation of her dark thoughts and fears. Whenever she tries to make progress, they always come back around. Black is the shade used to represent this darkness within her. In addition to this, there's also a red turtle that comes to your aid to help fight off the negative thoughts. You might think it's a continuation of the anger we saw red represent earlier, but I saw a theory that the red turtle represent GRIS's heart. It's trying to piece her back together, and when confronted by her dark feelings, it fights back and prevails. I think maybe the most genius part about the use of colours in GRIS is the name GRIS itself. If you didn't know, GRIS is the Spanish word for grey, the exact midpoint between black and white, a balance of the two, and that's exactly what the story of GRIS, the character, represents, a balancing of all the colours to finally reach emotional stability. Talking about the colours, the artwork in GRIS is maybe the best I've ever seen in a video game. You can so clearly see the love and passion put into their craft. Each area is designed so intricately and they're also emotionally layered. Every piece of symbolism is so masterfully placed, being so subtle yet so easily understood. Isn't it so insanely impressive how you can tell all of this without the game needing to spell anything out for you? We're all humans, and the game relies on our ability to relate in order to achieve narrative context. We know what's going on because we've probably been there before, and even if you haven't, you can empathize with what she's going through, because the thought of losing a loved one is something we all dread. I could go on and on about GRIS. I think it's a modern masterpiece that's more than just a game. It's an experience, one that everybody should try, but for the sake of the video, I'll stop there. Let's take a look at what GRIS has taught me. Color association can be achieved to tell such layered narratives. The human brain associates colors with certain feelings, and by using them in such ways, you can achieve the same desired effect of text explanations. Intricate level design can be used to show subtle representations of stories you're attempting to tell. If the areas around you further a story, it's easier to understand understand what's trying to be told without needing to have it said to you. And I haven't even touched on this yet, but again, heavy emphasis on the soundtrack. A great soundtrack will heighten any emotion the game is trying to portray. When angry, the soundtrack will be violent. When depressed, the soundtrack will be somber. When valiant, the soundtrack will scream victory. Music is a tool to further contextualize emotion. GRIS is proof that showing doesn't require telling. I feel like I understand GRIS more than I do most other characters, and she never tells us a single thing about herself. It's perfection. But I want to ask you a question. What happens if we remove any characters altogether? A game with nobody at all? How do you make that work? Well, to that, I bring you... Even in a genre filled with unique experiences, Flower is a game unique beyond comprehension. Whereas the other games have you playing as living beings, Flower doesn't have you playing as a life form at all. How can you get emotionally attached to a game where you're not playing as something that's even tangible, but it does tell quite a simple story that I think can be universally understood by anyone, and that's where it achieves its success. In Flower, you take control of the wind. You're essentially Mother Nature herself. Simply put, you do exactly what you do in ABZU, bring back life to the wild, just this time it's the natural process of nature healing itself. As the name suggests, you bloom flowers back into existence and turn empty fields of grass into colourful spectrums of floral delight. Honestly, that's pretty much all you do, but watching the process of it happen never gets boring. It's a sight to behold every single time you light up an entire field with blossoming beauty. It goes beyond that though, as it's not just a story about nature healing itself, but also one of nature fighting back. And damn, Mother Nature has hands. Whilst at first you're flowing freely through open fields, eventually you start to come across Mother Nature's worst enemy, industrial pollution, or in other words, us. It's us. Humans are the problem, humans suck. You should feel bad. See this field? Look at what you did to it. You did that. But it's okay, because we're here to change that. When man decides to try and take the colour away, it's nature's duty to return the joy once more. Just like I said previously, colour directly correlates to emotion, and whilst GRIS uses individual colours to represent a mental state, Flower uses all the colours. It's an overwhelming sense of joy whenever you see entire fields return to life. The game runs solely on that feeling. It's not necessarily telling a story as such, but it's offering an emotional experience. It's not trying to portray feelings in a way for the player to relate. It's directly injecting the feelings into you yourself through splurging out all these colours at once. It's definitely a unique experience. This is probably where J. Cole hibernated after avoiding all that beef. It just has that I have no enemies vibe, so peaceful and tranquil. Not many games are daring enough to be as empty as Flower is, but they pull it off perfectly. And why is that? Because it's just what that game company does. That's right. Remember earlier when I told you to memorize that name? That's because they've made yet another great silent game. They really are the masters of this genre. We thank you for your service. There's honestly not much else to say about Flower. It's a very short game that I only spent an hour and a half on, but that makes sense because my time on the game, much like your existence in the game, was only ever meant to be fleeting, a brief momentary breeze in the storm known as life. But what we did in the small time we had left an everlasting impact. So what did I learn from Flower? You don't need humans to tell a human story. Some things transcend humanity in a way that makes them universally understood, and in their own unique way, that's what makes them human. Sometimes a game doesn't need to be about a story or a motive. Sometimes it can just be a feeling. Feelings are an unspoken language, a lingo that we're all fluent in, and a game about a feeling is a game that every human can naturally understand. But right, okay, we get it. Silent games are bright and beautiful, blah blah blah, all that happy crap. That's great and all, but what about the rest of us? The ones who can't contain the beast inside? The ones who play their DS past bedtime? Who thrive in the darkness? Well, don't worry, I got you covered. It's time to get spooky. You probably get the idea by now that silent games are amazing at conveying such positive and hopeful experiences, but that's only one side of the coin. Like GRIS taught us, with light comes darkness, meaning for every bright silent game out there, surely there has to be darker ones, and this right here would be correct. But how exactly do they turn this into this and still be a good game? Well, let's take a look at... Well shit, consider my timbers shivered. Instantly you can tell we're not having fun anymore. Remember earlier when I said Journey was one of the fathers of the silent game genre? Here's another one. Limbo is an indie game that came out way back in 2010, predating Journey by 2 whole years. And let me tell you, there's no game out there quite like Limbo even 14 years later. It's so unique that still to this day there's no one solid explanation on what the story truly means. All we know is that this child is in limbo because, you know, it's called Limbo. So what's the game about? It starts off off with a young boy waking up in the middle of the forest, and wow, this is creepy as hell. No music, no text, no speech, just the eerie ambient sounds of the forest and near complete silence. Mom, I'm scared, take me back to the pretty flower game. You wouldn't believe it, but Limbo touches on some very similar subjects to GRIS. I know, right? How does this relate to this in the slightest? But at their core, they both explore death. In Limbo, we're playing as a child going for a journey after their unfortunate passing. Limbo is believed to be the place where the human soul goes before fully entering the afterlife, and that would explain why the game is so incredibly dark. I'm going to use this word a lot when describing Limbo, but the art direction is one of the most unique aesthetics I've ever seen in a video game. It's so deprived of any color, with the whole game basically being played in grayscale. Is this Limbo, or am I just playing League again? Actually, never mind. That is my personal Limbo. I can't escape. But seriously though, I commend the bravery to develop a whole game without a drop of color. You've got to have a lot of faith in the mystery being interesting enough, and to their credit, it certainly was. They build quite the weird little world here. It starts off empty, visually and audibly empty. It's just you, which is a weird feeling, as it feels too suspiciously quiet, yet oddly peaceful. Just like in GRIS, they really make such good use of subtle imagery in the background to progress the story. What starts off being an empty void of grey turns into a sky filled with hanging corpses. It's the gradual reveal of darker imagery that lets everything slowly sink in, especially as at first it really does feel like you're alone, but you start to see other decayed beings who didn't make it any further and realize, shit, there's something up ahead. And yeah, there are many things up ahead. In fact, get used to dying. Ironically, that's what happens the most in this game. See, clearly he's ready to move on, so just finish dying already! Skill issues aside, the game is so atmospheric even in the more chaotic moments. It goes from the eerily tranquil forest section to the dangerously hectic industrial section, and this is where the soundtrack thrives. I spent just over 3 hours on Limbo. Wanna know how long the soundtrack is? 20 minutes. Of course it depends on how long you're in these sections for, but it's still very short, and that's because, like I said, for most of the game you're sat in ambient silence. The music only starts to play in moments of importance, but for the majority of traversal, you're left with the sounds of nature, which works so well because Limbo is supposed to be an empty place. Another aspect of Limbo that I love is it's always playing on some kind of natural phobia or fear. Arachnophobia, aquaphobia, agoraphobia, nyctophobia, and every kid's worst nightmare, losing the 1v1 on Rust, all being phobias you'd expect a kid to have, and potentially symbolizing the fears he had throughout his life. Maybe he got bullied and was scared of older boys. Maybe he had mental health problems and the leech was his anxiety eating away at his brain. Maybe he couldn't swim and had past trauma with water. We really went from ABZU to drowning in a fucking puddle. Come on, you didn't even try. But the real fear of Limbo resides within the puzzles. Oh, right, because I was supposed to know I meant to moonwalk on this. For the most part, the gameplay isolated from the narrative is also very fun and clean, albeit a little challenging sometimes. There's clever puzzles aplenty and the platforming is very smooth. The game makes great use of its visual style to sneakily hide plenty of threats along the way that you gotta keep a keen eye out for. See? Well hidden. Who would have known the big spiky thing stabs? Overall though, Limbo is a complete package of just about everything. Amazing atmosphere, intriguing mystery, creative puzzles, and satisfying platforming, all whilst telling such a unique story. I adore how once again you can take many of the elements as your own interpretations. Quick spoiler warning, skip here to avoid, but the ending in particular embodies this. To this day, there are many theories on what the ending means. Some people think it's him reaching his sister and finally being able to pass on together. Some believe that this was a spot they both passed away in, and once he finally returns they can move on, which is why we see flies hovering around where their corpses would be, and some believe it's a woman burying him, as his soul can't move on until the body is buried. It's just so cool to me how the narrative can be our own vision of the story. So what have I learned from Limbo? Colors relate to emotion. We know that by now. So by removing everything, you can create such an emotionless void, and that helps drastically in creating dark ambient environments. You can use that lack of color to tell just as detailed of a story as you can by using all that color. Fear is a feeling, one that all humans have, and by speaking to those fears, you can speak a language all humans are fluent in without needing dialogue. Phobias aren't natural fears after all, ones that can be triggered just by seeing imagery, and just like with color, music heightens feelings, so by removing it, you can help to amplify darker feelings. By removing all the things that made the other games so successful, you can then create the complete opposite environment, which is exactly what a game trying to be uncomfortable should be. Limbo is a fascinating experience, one that I still think is art in its own right. It's even more interesting knowing that this came out years before the others too. It set the foundation for what a silent game could and should be like, which is exactly what led to a game built from the foundation that Limbo set. Inside is the second game created by the same team behind Limbo. That's right, it's not just that game company who have mastered the silent game. Playdead have also perfected the art of the eerie silent genre. Released in 2016, many years after that genre had already been much more established, Inside was and still is an experience unlike anything else. It took everything that Limbo did so well and, in my personal opinion, refined them to perfection. It plays almost like a spiritual sequel, although the games are completely unrelated. Well, kinda. You'll see. There's many similarities between the games, but before that, let's talk about what Inside's all about. The game starts with a young boy jumping down from a height and beginning to run. It very quickly becomes obvious that he's running away from something as he starts hiding and sneaking his way through the forest. Inside instantly sets the precedent that you're not alone this time, but in a way where it's still just as unnerving as Limbo. That being because literally every single conscious person is on the hunt for you, nowhere is safe, and you're never welcomed. In fact, upon being seen, needless to say, the game is insanely tense. Much like with Limbo, the game starts off virtually silent, with only the ambience of your surroundings making any sounds. What makes that so paranoia-inducing is the fact that any movement being made is by the people hunting you, so you know they're around. And I think the silence is used to perfection. It has that Silent Hill 1 ambience where everything is calm and quiet until suddenly,
hostile canine unit in your AO.
and they're so loud. It's horrible in the best kind of way. It's so incredibly intimidating, and that's helped drastically by the utter silence beforehand. We go from one extreme to the other before our brains can compute what's going on. It legitimately catches you by surprise and makes you dread the next encounter. Inside is a lot less scary in the traditional sense and more of a game of caution. In games like Journey and GRIS, the light is the answer, the savior, it's hope, it's the destination. With Inside, hell nah, you stay the hell away from that light, it is the danger. You get caught in that and you're dead. It's such a cool inversion of what is usually the embodiment of safety. It also has much more of an established lore than Limbo. The deeper you go, the more you find out about who and what you're running from. Some kind of organization that controls everything, and I mean literally controls everything. You eventually find out that whoever it is you're running away from is mind controlling the masses and has them completely under their command. At many points in the game, you yourself use these machines to control the now totally mindless individuals, which leads to many creative puzzles that were really fun to figure out. That's right, fun puzzles. And what makes the main character so sympathetic is how you can hear all the poor boy's pants, grunts, and whimpers. You can really get to understand his struggles and desperation to escape the situation he finds himself in, which is ironic because ultimately, you're running towards the problem the entire time. Whilst you're always running away with one eye over your shoulder, you're only ever following in the footsteps of their plan. Seeing the process of their mind control experiments is so jarring. Everything is so dystopian and unnatural. They got us doing COD zombie trains out here and they're just standing there observing like it's a normal Tuesday afternoon. It feels so uncomfortable, and that's due to the smart use of uncanny imagery. In Limbo, right from the start, you can tell from the art direction that the game is disturbed. With Inside, the game seems pretty grounded, but there's some surprisingly visceral imagery that I think hits harder because it's kind of unexpected. Spoiler for the ending here, but holy shit, just look at this thing. The ball of mass you eventually become is the amalgamation of all the experiments they've been doing, a sentient ball of flesh fighting back against the regime, all whilst letting out ghastly moans that let us know they are enjoying this less than we are. Again, my eyes, you can have them. I don't want sight anymore. Switch sports, don't need it. From the very beginning, Inside creates such a feeling of confliction. The mystery is so intriguing that as you find out what's going on, you want to dig deeper, yet you know the further you go, the closer you're getting to the threat. And unfortunately, our morbid curiosity plays into the organization's hand as they planned for this. It was the plan. At every moment, they have lighting set up ready for our arrival. They even pre-planned a trap for our eventual escape. It's truly like we're playing as the boy as well. We were mind controlled by them too. We went too deep. Now, this is an even bigger spoiler warning for the secret ending, skip ahead to avoid, but right towards near the beginning of the game, you can find another hidden bunker with another mind control device hooked up to some computers. If you unplug it, everything stops, including the boy. He takes the same position as the mindless people from earlier, meaning this entire time he was under their control too. Everything in the other ending was planned and controlled. You never really had free will. Moral of the story? Down with the bourgeoisie, down with the elitist society, the top 1% who control the sheepish masses, or something like that. Now, as a cool little side note, I want to show you something. There's a section in the barn where you're chased by a possessed pig. What's curious about this is when you save it, you pull out one of these. Look familiar? Yeah, looks exactly like the leeches in Limbo. And take a look at this. Recognize the icons? Again, the exact same icons from the anti-gravity section in Limbo, and anti-gravity does exist prominently in Inside too, which suggests that maybe Inside takes place in the same universe as Limbo, or they could be cool little Easter eggs. Who knows, but the pig encounter and the anti-gravity play an important gameplay role, so I'd like to think so. Inside, much like Limbo, is a complete package, but even more so to me. The story is captivating and the puzzles are so creative and fun to solve, with the platforming being extremely polished. I was tense, I was cautious, I was uncomfortable, but I was also enthralled, curious, and engaged. So what did I learn from playing Inside? Less is sometimes more. When the game was at its calmest, that's also when it was at its most tense. In silence is anticipation, dreadful anticipation for the next chase. The brain will naturally come up with its own imagery in the absence of sound. Loud can equal scary, and not in a cheap jump scare way. When everything goes from silence to sudden chaos, it really adds to tension, especially when it's built up naturally over time. Using human senses to build up suspense fully immerses us in the game in ways text could never. Lighting, much like with color, can be used to provide emotional depth, whether through the safety of light from the dark or the danger of potential captivity. Smart use of lighting can be used to trigger a player's sense of danger, again in ways that text couldn't. As I said earlier, Inside is unnerving, but it's not horror. Limbo is certainly closer, with its much darker styled visuals, but I wouldn't consider that full-on horror either, which means only one thing: it's time to get even spookier. Of all the games I played for the first time whilst making this video, Little Nightmares surprised me the most. I always knew I'd enjoy it, but wow, it was really damn good. Maybe I'm just uninformed, but I've never seen another game quite like it. Little Nightmares has an oddly childlike charm to it for a game that's as horrific as it is. Unlike Limbo, which is darker in tone, Little Nightmares is a much more traditional horror game made with the intent to scare you, and trust me, you will get spooked.
I smell pennies!
I think what gives the game part of that charm is the fact it reminds me of movies like Coraline, with a hint of that Studio Ghibli magic in the creature's weird and often over-the-top designs. The studio behind the game even describe it as whimsical, and there's always charm in whimsical, even if the charm is, well, that. You also play as this little guy, and ain't she just a little cutie patootie? No, you'll see, but she definitely contributes to that horror movie for kids vibe I get, although this for sure is not for kids. Let's talk about the game though. Little Nightmares is a 2.5D platformer where you try and escape a vessel known as the Maw. Inhabited by a variety of corrupted souls, it's eat or be eaten. There is an entire narrative to the Little Nightmares franchise, but after doing some research, I found out that the first game is actually a sequel to the second, and because I haven't played the second yet, I'm missing a lot of context that I didn't want to look up to not spoil it for myself. Sorry, not sorry, but that means I can't speak much on the larger story. I have a lot to say about the gameplay though. First of all, Little Nightmares might just make the best use of ambient sounds of every game we've discussed so far. From the very beginning, I felt so uneasy and permanently on edge. It's just as silent as Inside and Limbo were, but with just enough distant noises to let you know you are not alone. The sound engineering was truly genius. It's like they injected AD audio into this game, because it always felt as if something was both behind you and ahead of you at all times. The game is linear, you go from right to left or left to right, and they'd always have some kind of ambient unintelligible sound playing in either only your right ear or only your left ear, making it feel like it was either coming from the direction you just left or the direction you're just heading to. It was such a unique feeling. It was as if the game was saying, sure, you might be alone for now, but there are other living creatures in this world, and at any moment, they will arrive. I couldn't decide if I felt like I was constantly being watched or not. If I wasn't being watched, I knew it was only a matter of time before I was spotted with just how much movement I could hear around me. And that's without discussing the amazing visual design. Having 3D depth for the movement was such a good idea, especially with how well they implemented lighting. You and your lighter were the only sources of light in the darkness. If you wanted to explore, which you kinda had to, you yourself needed to move closer to light up the area. Again, it was such a weird feeling. The light was comforting because it scouted the danger, but it also was the danger because it required you to get closer to find out. That's what made you dread each new area though. The more you scouted and nothing happened, the bigger that sense of dread became. You just knew it was more likely something would happen within the next room every single time you entered. I think the best part about these unintelligible sounds were how they preyed on your imagination. There's no way you could possibly associate any of those noises with anything of our world, which is helped so much by one of the best tone setters I've seen in a game. Oh, so there's anti-gravity in this game too, huh? But seriously though, this is the first of a person you see in the game, and they decided to unalive themselves because they didn't want to hang around in this place anymore. Kinda ironic. Mission failed successfully? They take it a step further when the first actually alive being you see after that is this guy. Long Dennis? Is that you? The appearance of the janitor confirms all your worst nightmares though. It lets you know that yeah, the characters are just as bad as you thought, and it only gets worse. Just look at this monstrosity. Why have one when you can have two? I just know they got something nasty stored up in those layers. And don't even get me started on these guys. They have heads shaped like droopy nutsacks. The only normal thing on the ship is this lady, and she's just creepy. At least she knows it though. The only way to defeat her is to show her a mirror. Being self-conscious defeats us all. But notice how I never said 6, the main character was normal. She's the worst of them all. You go around finding these little guys, giving them an embrace and getting them to follow you around. Look at this little guy trying to help us out, offering us a little glizzy. What a real one. Oh my god! What the fuck? I don't want to play as this bitch anymore. Why would you do that? I've got to give the camera work some huge credit here too. In every single moment of Little Nightmares, something is always moving. It could be static electricity, wind outside, or these poor guys running for their lives knowing the monster I'll become. There's always something in the set piece that's moving and keeping the world feeling alive even during the quiet moments. And the camera work adds to that so much. It's always in motion, keeping the world moving and letting you know that everything is active around you. Even when there's nobody around, there's always hints that someone's been here recently. I love the level design for this very reason, as it makes for some really creative puzzles. You have to pay attention to the room around you because how you move depends entirely on how you utilize your surroundings. You can pick up anything small enough and throw it. Sometimes you need to do that to reach places too high, and sometimes you can throw something just as a distraction. On top of that, you'll also need to climb up a lot to move forwards, and these climbable areas blend in so seamlessly into the background. Another element of the character design I love is how small 6 is compared to everyone else. Is this how it feels to be 5'11" in a 6-foot world? It just makes everything around you seem like so much more of a threat. You're a small, fragile being in a world filled with giant monstrosities. All you can really do is run away all the time because there's no shot you can fight back. If only you could show one of these to a mirror, maybe you could melt off one less neck. Overall, Little Nightmares is such a complete game. It's got something for everyone. An aesthetic the horror lovers will adore, smooth gameplay for the platform enjoyers, and a vibe that makes it a great entry game for non-horror players. It's not too spooky that it will scar you for life, but has an amazing atmosphere that will definitely have you on edge the entire time. So what did I learn from Little Nightmares? Shading, much like lighting, can be used to really play with that innate sense of danger. It can grasp at human curiosities in ways text could never. It compels you to explore the unknown, inviting you into the danger without directing you there through any dialogue. You simply choose to delve deeper with your own free will. Perspective can be used to amplify scale. We don't need to be told how helpless we are when we can visually see how tiny we are compared to everything else. Feelings of doom come naturally when the imagery contextualizes the level of threat we're approaching. Another smart approach to show, don't tell. Camera motion adds a dynamic feel. Even in moments of silence, the camera slowly swinging makes it feel like there's never a dull moment. It puts you on edge because you never truly feel like things are calm. Something is always moving and it doesn't sit right. Visual representations of that achieve far more than text just straight up telling you there's something out there. After looking at Limbo, Inside, and Little Nightmares, I think it's safe to say you can have a silent game be unsettling and still succeed. In silence, you really can tell such tales of hope and dread. Narratives that are extremely layered and take deep emotional dives into the human psyche, or even tales of grander stories like societal issues or environmental problems. But sometimes you don't want any of that. Substance? Story? Pfft, nah. Sometimes you just want to get a little silly. I've looked at a lot of darker games, so let's end this video on a lighter note. It's time to look at... No, Kendrick, you're wrong. I'm the biggest hater. I know I've said this about nearly all of these games, but I truly mean it the most with Untitled Goose Game. There's nothing else out there quite like this. When it dropped back in 2020, it was exactly what the world needed. We were all in a losing battle against the crush card virus, I don't want to say the actual name, and life was becoming pretty miserable. So what did we all need? An outlet. And that's where the Goose comes in. Not the hero we asked for, but the hero we deserved. In Untitled Goose Game, you walk around as a goose and just cause absolute chaos. I'm talking total anarchy. And why? Literally just because you can. That's it. There's nothing else to it. You ruin people's days just because you have the power to. It's amazing. All these innocent people didn't do a single thing to deserve any of this. And that's why it feels so good. Hate fuels me. I'm powered by the hate. I wake up early just to have extra time to be a hater. The best part is you're not even doing anything that bad. You're just causing constant minor hindrances. And you already know that's the shit that ruins a day. Those small annoyances that are ruin even the best of moods. You can really plot out some absolutely heinous stuff too. I think my favorite objective objective to cross off was this one. You steal this kid's toy plane, drop it at the shop's floor, and make him have to buy it back off the store owner. That's childhood trauma right there. He's taking that with him for the rest of his life. We aren't just ruining days, we're ruining entire livelihoods. This is some reverse Flash type hating. Yeah, fuck you, bitch. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. Fuck your shoes, fuck your socks, fuck your glasses, fuck your broom, and you know what? Fuck you too. I'm sending you to the Shadow Realm, Jimbo. Maybe the worst crime you commit is exposing this guy's hairline. It's okay, man, it happens, but you gotta give it up at that point. Just shave it. Wait, Luffy? I'd like to make a public service announcement. I want to apologize to absolutely nobody. And if you thought that's where the torment ended, nah, we gaslight, gatekeep, and girl boss out here. These aren't my crimes, they're our crimes. Okay, you can't even blame me for this one. The fuck was your plan? Alright, Pinhead, this town ain't big enough for the two of us. Fuck yeah, we dripped out, baby. All jokes aside, Untitled Goose Game is genuinely such a unique game in a genre filled with unique games. It stands out even amongst the others because it's just so stupid but hilarious. It's slapstick perfection. The game reminds me of those old silent black and white movies where they were just going around doing silly things. Untitled Goose Game is so expressive. You can understand how every character feels through their reactions. And that's because you already know you're doing annoying stuff, so it's pretty easy to understand that, yeah, they're pissed.
You're fucking funny.
Which is what makes it so satisfying, elaborately plotting out something devious and getting to see such an expressive reaction to it paying off. Ultimately, the game is just living proof that if you give gamers freedom to do anything they want, they will just be as unhinged as possible. And sometimes that's all we want in a game. No story, no world building, no deep characters, just plain old fun. So what have I learned from Untitled Goose Game? Honestly, just that freedom allows us to create our own fun. You can put us in a world and let us do our own thing. It's much easier to get invested in a game when we're in control of everything. We understand everything going on when we're the ones who plan it out. We don't need dialogue because we already conferred with ourselves beforehand. The game isn't trying to explain an elaborate narrative or expand on the lore-rich world. It just wants us to be a little goofy and fuck around. And I think every human can understand that on a primal level. It's speaking to our heart with no words needed. We thank you, Goose, for your service. And with that, well, that's every game I played for the video. When I went into this, I honestly wasn't expecting the game quality to be as high as it was. Some of the most emotional, layered, and artistic games I've ever played have been the ones I've talked about today. Every experience was so unique and have left an impact on me that I'll never forget. It's so unbelievably impressive to me that all of these thoughts and feelings were conveyed with not a single line of text either written or spoken. Oftentimes these games speak to you on a deeper level. They connect with you on an emotional level, and that's a level of connection that you can only achieve through really special means. Feelings lose substance when you feel like you're being told how to react or being emotionally directed, but when you feel them naturally, it's such an otherworldly experience, one which you can't get anywhere else. Journey taught me that you don't need words to have a special connection with another person. ABZU taught me to take a break and absorb the world around me. GRIS taught me it's okay to despair because you'll come out of it a stronger person. Flower taught me to appreciate how beautiful life is. On the other hand, LIMBO toyed with my paranoia like nothing else before. Insight had me in deep introspective thought about real societal problems. Little Nightmares proved you can be endearing while still scary. And most importantly, Untitled Goose Game taught me sometimes it's just about having fun. And really, isn't that what every game should do? From the emotional to the thought-provoking, all the way to the downright silly, the human language is so much deeper than written words or spoken sentences. And I'm so glad we have the perfect medium to express our language. They aren't just games, they're art.